On April 19, 1972, two specially trained pilots strapped themselves into old MiG-17s. They took off from a secret airfield in the jungle. Beneath their wings hung two 250-kilogram bombs each. It was all they had. Their target was USS Oklahoma City, flagship of the 7th Fleet, bristling with guided missiles and protected by layers of escorts with state-of-the-art air defenses. She was leading the bombardment that had been pounding the North Vietnamese coast for weeks. Her crew knew they were within range of shore batteries, maybe patrol boats. But no one worried about aircraft. The U.S. Navy hadn't been hit by enemy aircraft since World War II. The Gulf of Tonkin simmered under the oppressive heat of April 1972. 4 American warships cut through the murky waters, their steel hulls glistening in the tropical sun as they maintained station off the North Vietnamese coast. Day after day, night after night, these vessels of the U.S. 7th Fleet had pounded the enemy shoreline with relentless artillery fire, their guns never cooling, their crews never resting. USS Oklahoma City, the guided missile cruiser, and the 7th Fleet flagship led the formation. Originally a World War II-era light cruiser, she'd been transformed into a technological marvel, boasting twin Talos surface-to-air missile launchers aft and 3 6-inch guns forward for shore bombardment. From her command center, admirals ran operations across the theater. She was the electronic brain of U.S. naval power in Southeast Asia. Nearby, USS Sterett, a Belknap-class guided missile frigate, bristled with cutting-edge weaponry. Her twin Mark 10 Terrier missile launcher could destroy aircraft at ranges impossible just a decade earlier. The ship's long-range air search radar scanned the skies non-stop, while its missile guidance radar stood ready to guide missiles with pinpoint accuracy. Sterett also carried early electronic warfare receiving gear and anti-ship missile defense capabilities, marking a shift toward the future of naval warfare. Flanking the larger ships were the destroyers USS Lloyd Thomas and USS Higbee, both Gearing-class warships. Each carried 6 5-inch guns in 3 twin mounts, proven in countless shore bombardments. Higbee had been specially modified as a radar picket destroyer, her enhanced sensors providing early warning capabilities that complemented the cruiser's more sophisticated systems. The American bombardment had a strategic purpose: to disrupt North Vietnamese forces using the coastal highway to move troops and supplies southward toward the escalating battle in Quang Tri Province. Every shell was intended to disrupt these supply lines. But operating this close to enemy shores came with risks. Radar screens stayed lit, operators alert, guns ready. Crews knew they were within range of coastal batteries, and whispers of new North Vietnamese weapons kept tensions high. Just 15 kilometers inland, the North Vietnamese observed the Americans' every move through powerful binoculars and radar scopes. They noted the ship's patterns, timing, and apparent invulnerability. Desperation bred innovation in the North Vietnamese military headquarters. The American fleet's relentless bombardment devastated coastal installations and terrorized civilian populations. Traditional shore batteries had proven woefully inadequate against the mobility and firepower of the 7th Fleet. In the underground command bunkers of the Vietnam People's Air Force, military planners were preparing an unprecedented strike to shatter the myth of American naval invincibility. Something radical was needed to force the Americans to respect North Vietnamese airspace and territorial waters. The solution came from an unexpected source. For the first time, North Vietnamese planners decided to use their MiG-17 fighters in a direct confrontation with the U.S. fleet. This decision broke doctrine and tested the limits of possibility. The MiG-17 was a subsonic fighter designed in the Soviet Union for air-to-air combat and ground attack against land targets. Known as Fresco, it carried 2 23mm cannons and 1 37mm cannon, giving it devastating firepower against other aircraft. With a maximum speed of 1,100 kilometers per hour, it was agile in dogfights, but had never been intended for precision attacks against naval targets. Compared to the supersonic F-4 Phantoms and F-105 Thunderchiefs dominating Vietnam skies, the MiG-17 seemed hopelessly obsolete, lacking speed, range, and sophisticated avionics. But it possessed one crucial advantage: it was expendable. North Vietnam had dozens of MiG-17s. Losing a single American fighter was a significant blow to U.S. air power. The mission required the MiG-17s to carry BTAB-250 bombs, 250-kilogram high-explosive weapons designed for attacking hardened targets. This modification transformed the nimble fighters into ungainly fighter-bombers, stripping away much of their maneuverability and making them even more vulnerable to American defenses. But this mission wouldn't come down to hardware alone. It would hinge on the pilots, hand-picked, trained in secret, and prepared to push their MiGs beyond the limits. 2 pilots volunteered for this unprecedented mission, Leish 1C and Win Van Bai B. Both were seasoned aviators who had survived brutal air battles over North Vietnam, where American technological superiority had claimed so many of their comrades. The groundwork had to be laid. Months of quiet planning, testing, and fine-tuning began in 1971. The pilots underwent specialized training tailored for maritime strike missions, something entirely new in the North Vietnamese playbook. Flying over open water posed challenges they'd never faced. No terrain features to navigate by, just the disorienting vastness of the sea. They drilled relentlessly in overwater navigation, practiced visual identification of ship silhouettes at long range, and studied the layout of American naval formations. Most critical was the bombing itself. Hitting a fast-moving warship required precise timing and angle of attack. They learned to calculate approach vectors, release points, and escape headings, all by eye, with no computerized aids. Every second in the attack run had to be perfect. There would be no second chance. This training was conducted in absolute secrecy, with pilots moved to remote locations to practice without detection. The centerpiece of the operation was Gat Airfield, hidden away in Quang Binh province. The base consisted of little more than a dirt runway and carefully camouflaged aircraft shelters. American reconnaissance flights had never detected its existence, making it the perfect launching point for the surprise attack. The Air Defense Air Force Command orchestrated a complex intelligence network to support the mission. The 923rd Air Force Regiment provided operational control, while forward command posts and observation posts tracked American ship movements. A crucial element was the 403 anti-sea radar station at Nat La Estuary, which used Soviet-supplied equipment to monitor enemy vessels beyond visual range. On April 18th, the 2 MiG-17s began their covert journey. They took off from Cap Airfield, transited through Gia Lam and Vinh, and entered Gat. The movement was timed to avoid American reconnaissance flights and executed with the precision of a special operations mission. For hours, the pilots waited at the primitive airfield, monitoring radio communications and radar reports. They watched as the American ships maintained their bombardment schedule, noting the predictable patterns that would soon become their target's vulnerability. Air defense was not part of their plan. The moment finally arrived on April 19th. By 3 p.m., intelligence reports indicated that 4 enemy ships had positioned themselves just 15 kilometers from Dong Li Hua, while 3 more vessels operated 18 kilometers from Dong Quang Chai. Most importantly, 2 ships had moved to within 7 kilometers of Dong Nhat Le, their guns actively bombarding Dong Hoi town. The American fleet was closer to shore than usual. Military commanders assessed the situation. This was their opportunity. 2 obsolete fighter aircraft, armed with conventional bombs, were about to challenge the most powerful naval force in the world. At 4:05 p.m., the primitive airfield at Gat exploded into action. Lis Wanji and Win Van Bai B, each struggling under the weight of 2 BTAB-250 bombs, accelerated down the dirt runway. The aircraft had never been designed for such heavy loads, and their engines strained to achieve takeoff speed. Every meter of runway was precious as the fighters clawed their way into the humid air. Now, they faced featureless skies, shifting horizons, and no visual anchors. If anything went wrong over the Gulf, there'd be no soft landings, just open water and no rescue. The MiG-17s flew low, using coastal terrain to mask their approach from American radar systems. Meanwhile, 15 kilometers offshore, the crew of USS Sterett maintained their vigilance. The ship's AN/SPS-48 air search radar swept the skies, its electronic beam probing for aerial threats. The system was designed to detect aircraft at ranges far exceeding anything North Vietnam possessed, giving the Americans what they believed was an insurmountable technological advantage. but the North Vietnamese had studied American capabilities. The MiG-17's low-altitude approach created a flight profile that minimized radar cross-section and reduced engagement windows. Their obsolete aircraft paradoxically became an advantage. The Starets Terrier missile system had been designed to counter high-performance Soviet bombers, not agile fighters operating at wave-top height. Then, at approximately 5 p.m., the technological advantage shifted. Starets radar operators detected 3 hostile aircraft approaching the fleet formation. The contacts appeared as small, fast-moving blips emerging from the coastal clutter. General quarters sounded throughout the fleet. The piercing alarm sent hundreds of sailors racing to battle stations. Gun crews spun their weapons toward the threat axis, while missile systems powered up, their sophisticated radar arrays locking onto the approaching aircraft. Le Xuanji, the first MiG-17 pilot, focused his attack on USS Higbee, the radar picket destroyer, positioned to provide early warning for the fleet. The ship's enhanced sensors had detected the incoming aircraft, but her defensive armament consisted primarily of conventional guns and light anti-aircraft weapons, good against World War II-era aircraft, but potentially inadequate against a determined jet fighter. Xi later described spotting the American ships from 10 to 12 kilometers away, seeing them as dark silhouettes against the lighter sea, their distinctive profiles making identification possible even in extreme range. Le Xuanji made his first attack run, diving toward the destroyer through a wall of anti-aircraft fire. Higbee's 5-inch guns tracked the aircraft, their radar-controlled systems filling the sky with proximity-fused shells that exploded in lethal black clouds. Machine gun tracers created streams of fire, forcing the MiG-17 to maneuver violently to avoid destruction. His first attack missed. Xi pulled away under intense fire, his aircraft damaged but still flyable. The second attack also failed, the bombs falling harmlessly into the sea as anti-aircraft fire disrupted his aim. But absolute determination surged through Le Xuanji. On his third attack run, persistence paid off. Xi bored through the defensive fire. He adjusted his aiming point and released both BTAB 250 bombs with devastating accuracy. The 250-kilogram warhead struck Higbee's aft 5-inch gun mount, creating a massive explosion that could be seen from every ship in the formation. The blast was catastrophic. Steel fragments sighed through the air, while secondary explosions rocked the vessel as ammunition cooked off. The destroyer's steering and propulsion systems suffered damage, reducing her mobility and making her vulnerable to follow-up attacks. The explosion wounded 4 sailors, but casualties could have been far worse. The gun crew had been evacuated earlier due to a hangfire malfunction that had left a shell stuck in the barrel. As his aircraft pulled away, Xi caught sight of the damage, clear proof his mission had hit its mark. Simultaneously, Nguyen Van Bai B spotted 2 enemy ships below his flight path and zeroed in on the fleet flagship, USS Oklahoma City. Bristling with missile launchers and guarded by layers of escort vessels, the cruiser should have been an impossible target for a single aging MiG-17. Yet Nguyen Van Bai B pushed forward, eyes locked on his prize. With no advanced targeting systems, he was forced to rely entirely on visual aiming. Flying low and fast, he cut through a hailstorm of concentrated firepower from the entire fleet. At 750 meters, he radioed ground control to report his position, and he released his bomb load. The explosives missed, plunging into the water just short of the Oklahoma City, sending towering geysers of seawater crashing over her decks. The blast caused minor damage to the ship's stern, but its true impact was psychological. The most powerful naval force on Earth had been struck by 2 obsolete fighters. The Americans wouldn't let this go unanswered. The counterattack was swift and overwhelming. USS Starets Terrier missile system, representing the pinnacle of naval air defense technology, engaged the retreating aircraft. The system could track and engage multiple targets simultaneously, using radar guidance to intercept aircraft. Exactly what happened after that is still a matter of uncertainty. According to the American account, the first Terrier missile streaked into the sky and locked onto its target with lethal precision. One of the MiG-17s, already banking hard in a desperate attempt to evade, was caught mid-turn. The missile closed the gap in seconds, striking with a blinding flash. The second missile roared off the rails moments later. its radar track converging with a second MiG just as the aircraft vanished from the screen. To the crew aboard Sterret, it looked like another direct hit. No wreckage, no parachute, just a sudden absence where a fast-moving target had been. Or so the Americans claimed. However, the North Vietnamese perspective tells a dramatically different story. In their account, the mission was a complete triumph. From their cockpits, the hits were clear. Explosions tore into the formation below. 2 destroyers struck, one engulfed in smoke, another ship rocked by a blast near the stern. Tracer fire chased them too late as they pulled out. Then, Terrier missiles launched, streaking toward them. Le Xuan Ji and Nguyen Van Bai Bi dropped low, skimming the waves, throttles wide open. But the missiles passed close enough to rattle the canopy. Fuel low, the battered MiGs hurtled toward Ghat airfield. They slammed onto the rough dirt runway, landing gear groaning as wheels bounced over uneven ground. For a heartbeat, it seemed they'd break apart, but they held. After 17 intense minutes, the pilots finally came to a shaky stop. They'd made it back by the narrowest margin. The contradiction between American claims of MiG shot down and North Vietnamese assertions of successful recovery would become one of the enduring mysteries of the battle. Both sides had compelling reasons to claim victory, but the stakes were too high for deliberate deception on either side. Yet, even as the air battle concluded, new threats were emerging from the darkening seas. As the last echoes of the air attack faded across the Gulf of Tonkin, the American fleet faced what appeared to be an even more dangerous threat. The MiG-17s had been spectacular but brief. What emerged from the gathering darkness would prove far more mysterious and controversial. At approximately 6 p.m., as the U.S. ships withdrew toward the northeast, USS Sterret's surface search radar detected 2 new contacts. The targets appeared to be small, fast-moving vessels that seemed to be shadowing the American formation. In the aftermath of the air attack, any unknown vessels had to be considered hostile. The suspected attackers were identified as North Vietnamese P-6 class torpedo boats, compact but lethal vessels based on the Soviet Project 183 design. These boats represented a fundamentally different threat from the MiG-17s. Where the aircraft had been obsolete fighters pressed into an unfamiliar role, the torpedo boats were purpose-built for exactly this kind of engagement. The P-6 boats were floating weapon platforms optimized for coastal defense. Armed with 2 533mm torpedo tubes and light automatic cannons, they could deliver devastating attacks against much larger vessels. Their speed of approximately 40 knots made them difficult targets for the heavy guns of American cruisers and destroyers, while their small size and wooden construction reduced their radar signature. More importantly, the boats could be equipped with MR-331 range-out radar, a Soviet system capable of target tracking and fire control, giving them the ability to engage targets beyond visual range. Compared to the massive American warships, the P-6 boats seemed insignificant, but naval history was filled with examples of small, fast vessels defeating much larger opponents through superior tactics and favorable circumstances. For 30 tense minutes, USS Sterret's radar locked onto the shadowy contacts. Finally, she unleashed hell with her 5-inch gun, sending high-explosive shells streaking through the night, each blast ripping through the water far beyond the reach of torpedo boats. Both suspected North Vietnamese vessels shattered before they could threaten the fleet, or so the Americans claimed. Again, the North Vietnamese Navy told a completely different story. According to their official records, no naval vessels had participated in any engagement until August 27th, more than 4 months after the Battle of Dong Hoi. While even the idea of P-6 torpedo boats posed a serious threat, an even greater danger loomed on the horizon. The question surrounding what unfolded after the MiGs left deepened with new reports of an anti-ship missile strike. But this wasn't just any typical missile. Aboard USS Sterret, tensions snapped tight as the crew's instruments suddenly picked up an unmistakable signal, the electronic signature of a Soviet-designed SSN-2 Styx missile. Known for its precision and long reach, the Styx was one of the most feared weapons in the North Vietnamese arsenal. The Soviet-designed weapon used liquid-fueled rocket propulsion and combined inertial guidance with active radar homing. It could cruise at altitudes of 150 to 300 meters, making it difficult to detect until the final moments of its attack. The missile seeker head would activate only 6 nautical miles from the target, providing terminal guidance against the largest radar signature in the formation. The Americans were never certain North Vietnam possessed such weapons, and if it were true, the balance of power in the Gulf of Tonkin would shift decisively against them. Alarms blared, radar screens flickered with urgent blips, and every eye was fixed on the tracking data. The threat wasn't just real, it was imminent. Suddenly, the radar showed a split contact. One target appeared to divide into 2 separate blips, signaling a dual missile launch. Recognizing the danger, the crew aboard USS Sterett sprang into action. They powered up the SPG-55 fire control radar, locking tightly onto the incoming threat. Without hesitation, Sterett fired 2 Terrier missiles, their boosters roaring to life as they streaked through the sky, guided precisely by radar beams aimed straight at the diverging targets. At 7,400 yards, the first missile detonated in a sharp burst, and the hostile target vanished, its electronic signature cut off abruptly. The second missile held the lock, ensuring the threat was neutralized. The crew confirmed the intercept, destroyed the incoming missile before it could reach the fleet. However, there was just one gaping hole in this version. According to Russian sources, North Vietnam had not received Styx missiles or their launch platforms until 2 years after the Battle of Dong Hoi. Soviet officials were emphatic that they had not supplied the Vietnamese with anti-ship missiles during the earlier period, creating another layer of contradiction in the official accounts. Regardless, something was lighting up Sterett's electronics. One possible explanation is that Sterett's radar detected multiple surface contacts, and when one suddenly appeared to split into 2 echoes, the system locked onto both, mistaking this for a missile launch. At the same time, electronic countermeasures picked up signals similar to those of a Styx missile, but these could have come from other sources. Together, the radar and electronic signals may have created a false alarm, leading the crew to believe they were facing a missile attack, when the reality was less clear. But Dong Hoi's geography complicated things. Surrounded by high hills, the bay created false radar echoes. Sterett's missile illumination radar, built for open ocean, generated numerous false returns so close to shore. Atmospheric conditions worsened the picture. Warm, humid air formed ducts that bent radar signals far beyond normal range, a phenomenon known as anomalous propagation, common in tropical waters. This could make distant, stationary objects appear as nearby, fast-moving threats. Created multiple phantom targets from one. Sterett's electronic countermeasures were also basic. The ECM systems needed manual analysis and lacked modern threat libraries. A North Vietnamese torpedo boat, switching its range-out radar from search to track mode, could produce electronic changes mistaken for missile launches by inexperienced operators. Another view suggests the torpedo boats, detecting Sterett's missile radar, believed they were under attack, shut down radars, and vanished from screens, feeding the illusion of missile intercepts. These geographic, atmospheric, and technical factors produced an extremely confused radar picture. Under stress and with incomplete data, Sterett's crew made split-second decisions amid uncertainty. Within hours of the Battle of Dong Hoi, U.S. aircraft launched fierce retaliatory strikes against North Vietnamese airfields. Dong Hoi Airport, the closest to the attacking aircraft's flight path, was hit first. Then, on April 20th, American bombers struck Vinh Airport, attempting to destroy any remaining MiG-17s. The most significant retaliation came on April 22nd, when American intelligence finally located the secret airfield at Gat. 33 aircraft participated in the massive strike designed to eliminate the base. The bombing, however, proved limited. One MiG-17 was damaged in the attack, and the remaining aircraft managed to evacuate safely to Gia Lam Airport. The Battle of Dong Hoi didn't change the course of the war, but it forced both sides to reassess their approach to naval combat. For the U.S. Navy, the strike exposed how vulnerable ships could be when operating close to hostile shores, even against outdated aircraft. While it's difficult to tie sweeping doctrinal changes directly to the battle, it clearly led to tighter patrol formations, heightened alertness, and greater reliance on layered air defenses. Most notably, it marked the end of naval daylight bombardments in the area, a direct tactical shift. For the North Vietnamese, the attack was proof of concept. They lacked the means to repeat such attacks regularly, at Dong Hoi became a blueprint, an example of how limited tools, used creatively, could deliver an outsized impact.